Much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm British, but living in the U.S. today, and I'm used to speaking at events with names like AdTech and OMA. So it's a nice change to be here at a conference with a romantic-sounding name like the Festival of Media. What I'm going to talk about for my time here is how data can change media markets. And I'm going to do that from my personal perspective of having seen over the years two significant changes occur. The first one was with a company by the name of Information Resources, IRI, and I was the CEO there for some 20 years. And basically, we brought the availability of scanner data to the CPG industry for the first time. And it caused some massive changes in the way that CPG marketers spend their marketing dollars. And I want to show you a little bit about the changes that have occurred that are still in place there, might be changing as we go forward here with the internet, but some of the lessons that I learned from that, and this back of the envelope calculation that I did do when we started comScore, where we are trying to do the same thing, take data and show marketers how to become more effective and efficient in how they spend their marketing dollars. Underneath all of this that I'm discussing is the reality that technological changes cause new data to become available, and it's new data that causes these changes in marketing spending. So let me show you what happened with the availability of scanning data. Before scanning data, a marketer would have to rely on bi-monthly Nielsen audit data. Nielsen had a field force of several thousand people that went out to the retail stores and counted the boxes on the shelves, figured out how much had been sold in a particular bi-month, and then showed that data back to their clients. Interestingly, the term bean counter that you might be familiar with, bean counter, a derogatory term for an auditor, a financial measurement guy, really came about because the first client that the AC Nielsen company had was the Campbell Soup Company, and the first category that they measured was canned beans. So the term bean counter is the term for somebody going out and counting the number of cans of beans on the shelf. If you were to look at audit data, though, back in the late 70s and early 80s, and you were a marketer, you would look at data like this and say, well, things look pretty stable. Not a lot of change, and I think it would lead you to spending money on longer-term marketing programs. You would probably be oriented towards spending money on television advertising, as an example. So imagine the reality hitting home when the first scanning data became available, and these very same data became available on a weekly basis. So these are exactly the same data as in the previous chart, but now graphed on a weekly basis. The blue line is the weekly sales, and the green bars represent the percentage of sales on a newspaper feature ad with a price reduction with an in-store display. It didn't take long for the reality of these data to hit home, both in terms of the manufacturer and the retailer perspective. Clearly, you can see that if I put money into trade promotion, I'm going to get an immediate reaction and response in terms of consumer spending. And the impact of this as we went through the 80s and into the 90s was really pretty dramatic. And this chart, I think this is probably the third time that you might have seen this chart today, but it shows the reality of what happened. So if you go from the left to the right, 1978, before the first scanning store was introduced, by the time we came to 1995, in the U.S., all of the channels of distribution in the industry were covered by scanning. And you can see that the amount of money that was being spent by CPG marketers on trade deal promotion had exploded to 13% of all of their revenue. And that represented an incremental $40 billion of additional money. And it's still true today. By the way, the dollars that are spent on the feature ads that flow through the retailer into the newspaper industry are pretty much the same today as they were back when this change first started, despite the challenges that the newspaper industry is facing today. I suspect that as we go forward, one of the major changes that will occur here in the packaged goods industry is that those feature ad dollars that are now being spent with the newspaper industry are very likely to move online. So as I kind of look back at my experience with IRI, what did I learn that then kind of led to this other company, comScore, that I'm the chairman of today? Well, the first thing I realized when I looked at the kind of data I just showed you is that it's pretty clear that the ability to measure sales response drives the allocation of marketing dollars. dollars will follow data. I don't think there's any question about it. And when I poked a little bit more at how companies were spending their research dollars, what I quickly realized is that companies across all consumer-facing industries spend 4 times more research money measuring how consumers buy products rather than spending money on media ratings. And so that led to the realization when we started comScore that what we should really do is move from the traditional type of ratings company that just measured the number of people watching a TV show or listening to the radio, reading print, etc., to really filling out a 360-degree view of what happened. What happened from the exposure to the media, the exposure to the ad, all the way through to what was bought. And that formed the basis of this particular database. And I'll just take a moment to tell you what's in it, and then I want to show you some of the findings that really support what Hernan discussed this morning, the impact of display advertising, which I think has been severely understated to date. And in part, the reason is because we've been using the wrong measure. And I want to suggest that the use of the click as a metric of the effectiveness of display ads is clearly the wrong metric. So in this comScore database that's been designed to be representative of the online population, we have 2 million people that we're now monitoring continuously across the world, 1 million in the United States, 1 million outside of the United States. What we capture is all of their web visiting and viewing, so all of the clickstream activity all the way down to the individual search query that was conducted, all of their online transactions, so the amount of money they spend at eBay as an example, by product, how much they paid, etc. We track that across all sites. We know the marketing stimuli. We know if they clicked on an ad. Importantly, we know if they saw the ad but didn't click on it. And I'll show you in a second the measurements that we've got of the effectiveness, as I said, of display advertising absent the click. We have all of their demographics. We can conduct surveys against these people. And here's one of the more important dimensions to this database. We have the name and address of these people. This is all done, I should have probably stressed up front, this is all done with explicit permission from these people that we're monitoring. They give us their name and address, and they let us link their name and, using their name and address to offline databases. So as an example, in the United States, we link to retailers' frequent shopper databases or retailers' credit card databases. We link, as an example that I'll use in my charts coming up here, we link to the Kroger supermarket chain's 40 million loyalty cards. Once we do that, we have a single source database that measures online exposure to advertising campaigns, and we can link it back to its effectiveness in terms of moving product at a retail store. The next part of this that will be available shortly, and we're in negotiations to do this right now, is linking using name and address to consumers' TV viewing data. This will create databases that will be orders of magnitude bigger than the kind of TV ratings databases that are available to the industry today. So what have we seen? Let me show you first what's happening in the United States with online advertising. And it's been hit by the economic realities that the world is facing, as of probably most countries here. So the total growth rate in the fourth quarter of 2008, these are numbers from the Internet Advertising Bureau, dropped to a growth rate of 3%, down from double-digit growth rates that we've been seeing in previous quarters. If you look at the components, and again, I think this is probably similar to a lot of countries that are now putting money against internet marketing. Search accounted for 47% of all the dollars. Display advertising, or just let's say display related, and let me just define what display means. Display is a banner ad, a static banner ad. It could be rich media, it could be video, it could be sponsorships. All of that is classed as display related, and that accounts for about 33%. So clearly search is the dominant component. But let's poke a little bit more at what's been happening. If you look at display related, it actually dropped in the fourth quarter of 2008 by 4%. Again, the internet isn't immune to the recession and the other economic problems. If you pull back, though, the layers of the onion, if you will, and you look at where that decline was coming from, it's not static display. So banner ads actually grew 8% in the quarter. Rich media suffered a drop of almost 20%. It looks as if in these economic times that advertisers were shifting dollars from some of the more expensive formats down to the less expensive formats. And banner ads actually grew during this time period. Search, if we look at the growth rate, still very, very healthy, a 15% growth rate, but certainly down from the growth rates in the 20s and 30s that we had been seeing just a couple of years ago. So clearly the internet, while it's certainly gaining share relative to total media, is certainly having its share of challenges. Now, let's move to what the metrics are that one might want to use if you're the advertiser to evaluate the effectiveness of online advertising. Traditionally, the click was the metric that was used for both search and display. A relevant metric for search, I'm not questioning the wisdom of that, but I do question the wisdom of using click rates on display ads when they've dropped to 0.1%. I just don't think any publisher would be advised to take that to an advertiser as an indication of the effectiveness of display ads.